There he is.
Representative Allred,
Here.
Representative Andrew,
Here.
Representative Berger. Representative Brown is excused. Representative Clauston, Representative Lawley,
Here.
Representative Obermuller,
Here.
Representative Provenza,
Here.
Chairman Northrup.
Here. All right, thank you.
Burger here.
Okay, so we're here for Senate File 98. This is Senator Barlow's bill. And Senator, would you like to walk us through your bill, please?
Good afternoon, committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this opportunity. Bill you have before you, Senate File 98, came as a request following a State School Board Association meeting this past fall. And there was a long discussion about, how we are recognizing and valuing those folks who have special needs at the end of their educational tenure in public schools and whether we are doing so. And I have honored to represent Campbell County School District now, not entirely, but in my county. But prior to, when I was in the House of Representatives, I represented House District 3. I got to know a lot of the superintendents and board members from some of the smaller districts, including Converse, Niobrara, Weston, et cetera, some of those smaller counties. So after that State School Board Association meeting, I got a call from Ann Oakes, who's the president of our chairman, of the Campbell County School District #1 board, saying, hey, we had this really good discussion. And Casey Tillard, who is the chairman of the one of the Converse County school districts, we'd like to put something together and acknowledge the achievements of those students that have special needs who will not otherwise graduate, receive a diploma, and walk across the stage like their peers do. And so that's how this was born, out of that discussion. Just for the record, my wife is also a master's degree in special ed, has taught in the school districts for many years. So not only is this as important as a constituent matter, has also had a personal connection and meaning to it as well for my family. Mr. Chairman, I might also add that's one of the reasons she was well qualified to be married to me as well. Special training. So what this does, Mr. Chairman, and the bill is very simple. You see, there's two entities authorized to take this up. One is the State Board of Education. Second one is our local school districts, of which, as you know, we have 48. So the bill, page 2, Mr. Chairman, this basically mimics what we're doing right now. The state board level mimics what we're doing right now for a high school diploma. So as you know, you meet the qualifications. For that, as a student, you are eligible to receive a diploma. The state board sets out those requirements, course completion, et cetera, assessment test. We're just mirroring that, saying that we're going to have a standardized method in the state of Wyoming to recognize those students that have educational disabilities, receive and are an IEP or an individual education plan in our school districts, and that they too have goals and meet those goals and should be acknowledged for their achievements as well. So I want to be clear, there are districts, and you will hear from some of those districts, who do something along these lines. What we're trying to do with this bill is standardize it and acknowledge these students, acknowledge their families, and acknowledge, of course, the educators who have been with them, some of them for longer, up until they're 21 years of old, because they're still eligible to receive services in public schools until they're 21 years of age. So that's what the bill does. The first part of the bill, as I said, Mr. Chairman, is page 2, lines 7 through 15. This is about, about establishing this at the state board level. And then the next page, page 3, lines 16 through 18, this goes into the school board trustees' duties and says, hey, we're also going to do these certificates of completion as required by the state board for these students. So, Mr. Chairman, and you'll hear some testimony about the second, and there was a second reason for this. One is to acknowledge the students, the families, the educators, and the value of the system that we have. We're very blessed to have in this state, educational system. The second reason is, as you know, there's national narratives about dropout rates, and there's statistics out there. Well, students that don't receive a diploma are automatically categorized as a dropout. And there are probably students that do not do the coursework and do not earn and could have otherwise received a diploma. But there are students who would never accomplish the diploma that we identify by statute and by our curriculum requirements or our standards. And so this is a way, and I think you'll hear in the testimony, at least on the Senate side we did, there is a methodology to have an alternate diploma. So this is the first step in understanding or getting to a place where we have an alternate diploma so that we can actually have a better assessment of what our dropout rate is. And these children are not included in that. These children are not included in the dropout rate. We have a diploma, those that receive go through all of the education plans. We have alternate diploma or this certificate of completion for students that they're not going to complete the same coursework as their peers, but they're still valued. They still complete, they still meet goals. They still do things to further themselves for the rest of their lives. And how can we acknowledge that? And then there's folks that are just not going to do it for whatever reason. So that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman. I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Certainly. Go ahead, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow, thank you for being here today. I too am special ed teacher, and this is the kids I teach. And in our district, we call it a certificate of attendance. They still walk. So my question is, which I appreciate this, I see certificate of completion more palatable or more it's a lot better. It really ties, I think you agree, it's better than calling a certificate of attendance, because my kids just didn't attend school. They had to achieve, I set goals for them, and they did what I asked them to do, and they're more than just, and they're not dropouts. They did complete what was asked of them to do, and they did a very good job. So do you agree with that?
Senator Barlow, please.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And I think that's the point is you have, and I won't go through, don't know the terminology like you would. That's your business. It's my wife's understanding. There's other people in the room, but in their individualized education plan, there are goals. There are things that we achieve. So it's not that they just showed up. No, they would have got many of those things, if not all of them done. And as I got Coach Schuler that sits next to me, Senator Schuler that sits next to me on the floor of the Senate. I'm honored to have her there. And she said, "Hey, look, these kids are the ones that show up and want to do something every day. These kids are the ones that they want to be there. They want to do the best they can. They're active, they're, et cetera." Maybe not every kid, but that was her observation about this. So I appreciate your and maybe this brings a uniformity too. You're going to hear from another school district that does something and maybe they call it something a little different. But how about we call it what we want to value, and that's accomplishment, achievement, completion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the good senator? Oh, go ahead, Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Barlow. So I was prepping for this in case you didn't show up. So it's my understanding right now that right now when these students aren't getting anything from the state, the families, the student aren't being recognized for all the work that they do. So I guess my vision with this is because the state board will be involved, they're going to get something that says you've completed what we've required, you've met your goals. And do you feel like now we'll have a method for the state to keep track of how many students are involved with this?
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question. I think that is, like I said, I think there's two things. One is to acknowledge accomplishment by the entirety, by the student, by the family, by the, and I don't know if there'll be any stories here today, but I'll just share without naming names. One of the people who's very interested in this has two children. And one of them has all the capabilities, and one of them is very challenged. And it's difficult to, have those two kids at the same place, and, they happen to be twins. And to say, one's going to get a diploma and be recognized, and the other one's going to say, all right, you're done, keep moving. So that's that. The second part is I absolutely agree that this is a way to acknowledge, to actually understand where we are in our public education system. When you start at the CDS, at the Child Development Center level, and you start progressing through, can we make differences in kids' lives earlier so we have more completions, or even better, more diplomas later? That's what hopefully we get some of that out of this information at the end. But how can we build a system that actually, maybe we have fewer completions, right? We have more graduations. We start putting our resources, we learn from it and put our resources, maybe deployed a little differently in time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Obermuller had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the issues that we've talked about is the student that reaches age 21 and then they're considered a dropout, and we're trying to kind of solve for that problem that they have stuck with it. They've had the perseverance. They've been to school. Does this bill, the way it's written, solve that issue if you have a person that ages out at 21 but really hasn't completed the educational individual plan that's established in this bill?
Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that this bill solves an educational plan deficit. What it does is acknowledge success, completion. So, and this obviously this requires a conversation. I don't know if it's going to go as far as rulemaking, but a conversation set some parameters about what completion means. What does that mean? And that'll be, I think there'll be I would look at it as a broad umbrella from the state board, and then districts get to individualize that as they see fit for their within their district. Hopefully there's uniformity, so we actually can make it count when we start to understand the numbers as what's a completion versus et cetera. And then, like I said, you're going to hear some things where it's not going to change achievement maybe. Hopefully, I know our educators are doing everything they can to get all our children to achieve at whatever level they're capable of. What this is going to do is acknowledge that achievement to a group that, and sometimes at least in a uniform way. How's that, Mr. Chairman? And maybe I didn't get to the question, and there's other people in the audience that can probably speak to the success better than I can. I just want to have a route to acknowledge and then differentiate dropouts from folks that should not be considered dropouts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one follow-up then.
Go ahead, follow up.
In listening to your answer, is it fair to say that one of your goals here is to not have a 21-year-old described as a dropout when they're done with this program, that we solve for that specific thing?
Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, and that requires that, and you'll hear that from, I think, testimony that will require this alternate diploma approach, which is through the U.S. Department of Education, and other folks will speak to that. So this is, I think, what you can look at this. If you want to look at this pure as a bookkeeping thing, no offense to the CPA on the panel, but truly, if you want to look at this as a bookkeeping thing, because we got to get some information, so then we know how to apply that to on a programmatic basis, and then we can differentiate dropouts from students that would not otherwise be able to achieve the diploma status, and then those that can. So then we can have some more nuance to understanding who really is a dropout in the state of Wyoming. So yes, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I believe the answer is yes. Long term, this bill is a step on that path. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Lawley, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Barlow, don't look at me like that. I actually really appreciate this bill. And I would say, as a grandparent of a special needs child, that having sat in some IEPs processes, that process itself begins to set parameters for this completion all along the way, really. Isn't that why you've tied it to the IEP process and to determine completion? Go
ahead, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. And My concern about is this end of the room is asking a lot of questions and I'm really afraid of this end of the room. They're not showing their cards. So, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, because that is the standard by which they are going through their educational process. They may be attending the same classes, they may be doing some things, but for a variety of reasons, they're not going to achieve potentially at the same level. We hope to grow them out of that. We hope to, start them younger and try to change that curve, but there still will be, a disability. That's what we're talking about, that they may not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree, Senator Barlow, and I think that for some, my grandson has Down syndrome and he's in the 6th grade in Worland Middle School. So there are parameters, but I do appreciate the spirit of this bill because, I've often thought if we could put on sort of these things that make you into a 3D world and we experience life under some of these disabilities, we would not argue that they aren't working hard and they aren't achieving. We would understand that some of them working very hard and overcoming obstacles. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow, you're awesome. I just want to ask one question. For our students without disabilities, we test them and we have a lot of testing, and that test is called WIALT, or the Wyoming, the YTOP. So these students we're talking about now, do we test those students? And do you know the name of that test? Because they earn the right as well.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I won't be able to answer that question. You probably can answer.
WIALT.
Yeah, you
They
do know.
test, yep.
Okay.
We have the
okay.
YTOP and then the WIALT, and
Okay.
they work very hard on that test. And I encourage anybody to go take that test as well. It's not easy. And as a advocate for these kids, advocate and a teacher, they deserve everything, Anyways,
Thank you. I appreciate
they
that.
test too. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry I didn't know that. And thank you to both of you for your passion. So we found the weak end of the room, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have a question, Representative Obermuller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That in looking at page 2 of this bill, as I read down from line 7 down through line 12, for me, it seemed to, in terms of its meaning and purpose, seemed to end there on line 12, and that the rest of it, I guess I need to have the rest of that explained to me why that's important to add those lines 13 through 15.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think that the first part is kind of establishing the first sentence is the overarching, identifying those that we're talking about, the students we're talking about, because they will fall under the IDEA and the having an IEP. The second one, I think, is making it individualized. It is saying this student is an individual. We're not comparing them to everyone else on the grade curve. This student's IEP will be different than someone else's. To Representative Lawley's point about a grandson, maybe someone else's grandson in that same class, and they may not have the same goals on their IEP. They may have different abilities on their IEP. So, and I'm not suggesting the sentence is absolutely necessary, but I really do think these are individualized. This is not a one-size-fits-all certificate. This certificate actually fits the accomplishments of the individual, not of the plan, or excuse me, not of some other outside criteria, such as how many math classes, how many science classes, how many passing grades, and all these things. This is about other achievements, life skill achievements. This is not just about grades in a classroom. This is about other goals that would be a part of this. And so I'm not suggesting if you took out that sentence, it changes the world or it maybe damages it, but I think this acknowledges that completion for these students is very individual. Their capabilities are very individual and unique. That's how I thought it read. And if it needs massaged, I certainly respect that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You have a question, Representative Berger?
Yes, I do. My question is, it doesn't take away that because this bill is here, Senator Barlow, it doesn't mean that if you're on an IEP, doesn't mean that you can't come out of high school without graduating. You
Ms.
still individualized.
Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I mean, there are different reasons people will be on IEP. If you have a speech or hearing or other thing, you could be on an IEP, but that would not mean you may necessarily not graduate and not receive a diploma. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the committee? Thank you, Senator. We'll start public comment. Anybody from the department like to comment? Thank you. Any elected officials? You guys come on up. Just fill up the chairs. Open it up to public comment. Anybody like to comment, please come up.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Wyoming School Boards Association. Really want to thank Senator Barlow for bringing this issue forward. I think it's a very important issue for us. It's pretty touching to see some of our elected officials on this committee be as touched as they are. In the districts that I've been the superintendent, we've given certificates of attendance, and I can tell you that those kids and those parents are even glad to get that. And I think this is one more way of operationalizing those students meeting what they need to do. As you can imagine, some of those kids are adopted by their classes too. And it means as much to their classmates to see those kids walk across the stage with them like it does. I want to speak to Representative Obermuller's point. I think the federal idea of being able to go through with your cohort in 4 years will catch us with those 21-year-olds. But I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I could have taken 5 or 6 years of high school, and those kids work 5 or 6 years of high school and do a great job with going through that. So again, I think this is a start for us, like Senator Barlow said, and I think we can work through the process and do some amazing things for those kids. Some of those kids are amazing. Some of those kids that have health impairments, that they're on feeding tubes or we're having to grind their food, and they're in there with their peers as often as we can, but they have to do what we can do. And each one of them is different. I mean, if we're looking at a Down syndrome kid and an autistic kid, they need separate services. There are, like Representative Berger said, that we do have a lot of our students that are on IEPs that will graduate. They can get through that course of study that's required by the state and by each district. But the other students that can't do that, this is just such a viable option for them that really stand behind doing that. And I'll let you talk, and then we can do questions after that.
It's okay with Chairman.
Go ahead. That'd be great.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. I wanted to speak to sort of federal law and how this fits in with federal law, federal requirements, because a lot of our choices about graduation are driven by the federal law. The federal Every Student Succeeds Act sets out its own accountability system. And within that, Every Student Succeeds Act, it sets out what a graduation cohort looks like. And so they say that you have to graduate on time in 4 years according to state standards to be counted as a graduate. That's the on-time 4-year cohort. They do allow for an extended cohort. Those are the kids that take more than 4 years to be counted as graduates, provided those kids meet some type of alternate requirements. Now, the reason this legislation is a step forward is it gets us closer to that. Mr. Chairman, we do have to do more in order for these kids to count as part of that extended cohort graduation rate. Wyoming needs to adopt an alternative diploma. Now, to do that, that's a lot of work. We have to figure out what alternative standards for graduation would look like. So we wholeheartedly recommend that this committee take that up as an interim topic. Exploring that, then we don't just take this first step, we take the next step. We figure out, how do we give more credit to these kids as a graduate? So the graduate is different than the completer, which is different than the attender. Certainly the idea of a certificate of completion is statewide recognition that you did what you were expected to do. Now, if that kid is on an IEP and does complete the state standards for graduation, then that student is entitled to a regular diploma if they do it within the 4 years, or if they do it within the extended cohort with the regular graduation standards, they can be counted as a graduate. But there are some kids who don't make that. There are some kids who need something different. And there are other states that have been down this route. We can explore what those other states have done. If we take this up as an interim topic, then we can look and see, what have other states done? How can we better recognize the work of these young people? So, Mr. Chairman, we come today both to encourage passage of this legislation, but also to encourage the committee to take this up as an interim topic, to explore the possibility of an alternate diploma and how that would then allow those students to count under those federal requirements as a part of the extended cohort graduation group. So we are caught. Wyoming has its accountability system. We can say what works, what counts for Wyoming, but there is that federal accountability system that we don't have control over. So if we are going to play within that realm, we're going to have to use the requirements that they set forth. So this bill is good. It's a great first step. It's a recognition. It's a uniform commendation, and it means something. It means something to people, to families, to students. So this bill is good, and we encourage you to do even more as you approach your interim.
Go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've probably been watching the House side on lots of issues and good bills. We had one the other day die for I don't know what reason, but I'm trying to anticipate some potential pushback. And so I'm wondering, like, have there been discussions about what that is? Was there pushback on the Senate side that you are aware of? And I was trying to be sure we're prepared for the 67th House.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Brian.
Representative Provenza, I would never know how to fully prepare you for the House. I can tell you that this was not a really contentious issue on the other side. If I were to imagine arguments that some would make, some would say districts can already do this. Some districts already do something like this. So the value in this is to encourage all districts to adopt this practice, to encourage a uniformity, and then also, as was brought up previously, the ability to start to have a sense of data so that we know if we are going to move on to an interim and we are going to talk about how many more kids might we be counting, we would have a better sense for that. So we already do it argument may be out there. And we don't need legislation in order to do this may be out there. But there are reasons why to encourage the legislation nonetheless.
Further questions for the gentleman? Thank you, guys. We appreciate your comments. Go ahead. Anybody else want to comment on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. All of these kids have an IEP. And if they complete that IEP, they ought to get something. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't call it a diploma. Across my Navy career, I dealt with a raft of a whole spectrum of young people, from nuclear trained reactor operators that should have had a bachelor's degree but didn't because of the way they came up, down to those that were lucky to graduate from high school. and they all did wonderful jobs. And I issued citations to many of them for good work. And so, you know, if these young people finish that IEP, and I get a little bit nervous when I hear people, we just heard some testimony about how we're going to count people. If they finish that IEP, they ought to get something. My wife, mid-career, got a bachelor or master's degree in reading education, and she taught young people reading specifically, and did very well at it. And some of them were pretty tough kids to work with. And so I submit to you that we should give them something called a diploma. Maybe you want to put some fine print on it. I got it. That IEP may do that, but I offer you the thought that the only thing between calling a diploma is perception management, and you guys can fix that. Subject to your questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Anybody else? Do you have anybody on Zoom? All right. Nobody else? Please come up, Senator, and we'll work the bill. We'll close public comment. Moved by Provenza, seconded by Lawley. Committee, do you have anything you would like to amend on page 1, 2, or 3? Anybody? Begging for a question. Go ahead, Representative Berger.
The only thing that I would entertain looking at, and maybe this would be through the interim, but those who previously have come through, could we get them a certificate of completion, or is this just from now until? That's just kind of a question or something else.
I'm sure he's thought about it. Go ahead, Senator. Would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, I did contemplate that as I drafted the bill, and I don't think there's anything in this bill that would preclude it from happening. I think that's something that a district could do on their own. I represent a small community, Wright, Wyoming, and there are, I happen to know 3 of these young people that are, one of them's not so young anymore, but they're in the community. I see them every time I'm there. And to the point that was made about their classmates are still there looking out for them, and they're looking out for their classmates. So I don't think that anything in this bill that would preclude a district from doing something more retroactive if they chose to, Mr. Chairman.
I would just comment that to have those students walk across the stage is probably the biggest event of their life. And it's a real honor to be able to see that happen, being a school board member. So good for you bringing the bill.
Yeah, I have a comment as well. Also, I go back to a comment you made earlier that this is a whole of community effort. And so teachers, what it says to these teachers that have invested so much in these kids. Job well done. So again, it says a lot to the whole community that supported this effort, that something is acknowledged in their work.
Go ahead if you want to comment.
Thank you. And thank you for that. I guess, you don't get to do things sometimes that maybe touch people's lives in a personal way when we're down here in Cheyenne. Maybe this touches a few lives in a very profound way and in their community. I would like to make a comment if I could, Mr. Chairman. And I know that you've moved the bill and maybe there'll be an amendment, maybe not, but to the diploma issue that was brought up in the testimony, that I think actually goes back, and which Mr. Farmer was talking about, this goes back to what a diploma and graduation requirements are under federal law. And we did look at using the word diploma. We looked at trying to nuance something in there so it was as close as we could. And we didn't go as attendance. We went with completion, certificate of completion based on their IEP. But I want to be clear with the committee. If I thought there was a way, or if you think there's a way to use the word diploma, I think I'm fine with that. But in dealing with our very good education legal staff, they suggested we not go there because that may raise some red flags with our federal partners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have a comment or a question?
Just a discussion, just a final comment.
Certainly.
And I agree that with the good senator there, that it's not about attendance, and completion is getting there. And it means something, and it means more than now considered a letter from home when you're 21 that they're a dropout, and they completed. And these kids do take the Wyoming alternative assessment. They take, it's a state test. It's very hard, and they work hard at that. And these kids work very hard. They're there every day. I love them. I love being a part of their lives, and I love being a part of our community, because that's the biggest thing I get to do, is celebrate those successes. And 16 years, 17 years of education that they went through, they get to celebrate, and they walk with their peers, and we just have an awesome time, and their teachers with them right there. It's a lot of fun.
Question being called, we'll proceed to vote.
Okay, Representative Allred,
Aye.
Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Berger,
Aye.
Representative Brown has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Clauston,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Overmuller,
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
Aye.
Chairman Northrup.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes do pass.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for bringing it.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate your time. Certainly, I'd be glad to give any additional information. Representative Clausen, Mr. Chairman, is on the bill, as is Representative Brown. But obviously, there's some pretty powerful testimony on the committee from other committee members. So thank you for taking care of it if it makes it to your House floor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for visiting.
Thank you.
News Committee.
Yeah. So we are adjourned.